block a little bit and
Sorry.
that's all right. I've been around adventure racing for a while and know it really well. And my idea, well, I said to Paul a few years ago, normally ITERAs have all been, in fact, most adventure races have been kind of in the north of England, in Scotland, in the lakes, further up north. And although I'm a Londoner, I live in Bristol now. I've lived in Bristol for a long time, and I know the southwest very well. That's why I do a lot of my training. And I said to Paul a few years ago, I reckon there's a great race down in the southwest. Um, and he was a bit like, well, I don't know. And I said, look, trust me, there's some really cool stuff in the southwest. We've obviously got an amazing coastline. Like, it's basically one big leg of land with an awesome coastline all the way down, north and south coast. So I was convinced that we can do a good course. And I started pulling some ideas together. And then Paul and I did a recce just before Christmas time. And I think Paul was very, very impressed, hopefully.
Yeah.
And my idea for the race is I'm designing a course and a race that I would want to do, that I would enjoy. So I'm maybe being a bit selfish, but this is a course that's not there to break people. It's honestly there to go out and enjoy. And also because I'm a bit biased, because I'm a bit of a southerner, to basically to really highlight some of the great parts of that part of the UK. And although it's not big mountains like the Highlands, trust me, it is hilly. It's definitely there's very little flat in the southwest of the UK. It's constantly hilly, and some of those hills are not rolling hills. They're pretty steep. So don't be don't expect to turn up to like somewhere like Norfolk and expect it to just be flat pan. It's a pretty lumpy part of the world. Um, and like Paul said, yeah, obviously it's multidisciplined, and we've designed the route that Paul touched on this, but if you're doing the shortest of the short course, you'll still see the best parts of the course. That's kind of how I've designed it. Is all the real scenic parts, the really fun parts, the bits that you'll remember. Pretty much all of the teams will do those stages, and then what we do for the teams that are a bit quicker and can travel further, we've bolted on extra bits which are still amazing, but the core part of the course is the really lovely bit. um and like Paul said, it's you're biting off a bit more than you can chew. We're definitely gonna probably take you out of your comfort zone now and again, but not in a dangerous way at all. And it's one of those things. I want you all to come away from the long weekend feeling, oh my god, I had a total adventure. And I've been lucky enough to do races that are like 6 hours long, but also 12 days long. And I feel like the ITERA-lite distance or length of like 48, 50, 55 hours is a really lovely distance. It's enough to challenge yourself and take you out of your comfort zone, but you're not completely destroyed at the end of it. And it's an achievable distance, I feel. And at the end of it, you'll feel like you've been probably disappeared for a week of your life in eventual land, but you're actually just going to be gone for 2 days. It's a good time of year as well. It's in the summertime. So normally ITERA is a bit later in the year, in August time. So we're going to have really long days, which is great because you'll see virtually most of the course in daylight, which is always a bonus. Obviously, the weather's, should be nice, but you can't trust that in the UK. But we're hoping for some good weather. And certainly, Paul's revealed where the start is. Well, not the start, sorry, where the race HQ is. But that doesn't mean that's where we'll be starting or finishing. So that's all of it is a complete mystery. We know pretty much where we're going now, but it will be, when Paul and I decide, it will be a surprise where we start and where we finish, and it will all become come open to you. I think Rosemary's going to talk about skills, but just a few things. Obviously, we are in a part of the world that has some pretty spectacular coastline. And I'm not going to give you away too much by saying we will be on the coastline a fair bit. And also, we're obviously going to be doing some pretty awesome kayaking. Obviously, being by the coast, it lends itself to kayaking. So, one thing, if you get time, obviously not now because it's too cold to kayak really and enjoy it. When you start getting into the summer, certainly, you know, get familiar to being in a boat, kayaking and stuff, and being out in the sea. because it's going to be, it's not going to be completely full on, but you just want to be comfortable in those situations, because we've got, if everything goes to plan, some of the kayak stages are absolutely amazing. To me, they'll probably be the highlight of the course. And there's nothing like sitting in a boat and paddling along and just going, oh, this is just amazing. And also one thing, just to let you know, because I've done a lot of races, one thing, if we have a more challenging leg, a tough leg, which are normally the kind of the trekking legs, it's normally the stages that take a lot out of you, I'm going to design it so it's followed with a much easier leg. So you've kind of got a bit of a respite. You might push yourself and think, oh my God, I'm close to broken here. But then you'll come in transition and you can have a good feed, get yourself sorted out. And then the next stage will be a lot easier, a bit more relaxing. So that's kind of how I'm designing the course. Anytime you've got a particularly more challenging stage, the next stage will be a little bit easier on you. So yeah. Obviously I can't tell you anything about the route, but it's awesome. If I was doing this race, I'd be super, super excited about it. I know where we're going. It's all the best bits, all the places I train and go and see. It is really, really, it's pretty special, I would say. And the special stages we've got are really special too. A lot of the special stages we're doing have not been done in the UK for quite a long time. So there's some pretty cool stuff we'll be doing in the special stages as well. So I think I've covered all that, but obviously if you've got any questions, then we can continue in the session and far away.
Yeah, sure. Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, just on questions. Yeah, drop stuff in chat and we'll pick that up later on if you've got questions. It's probably also worth saying I grew up in Devon. Might not sound like it, but that's where I grew up. I spent my teenage years in Devon. So it's a place that's kind of familiar to me. So if you find that there is a checkpoint in a random location outside a random house, that's probably the house I grew up in. I mean, yeah, it's indulgent, but so what?
Course description, Paul's old house.
Paul's old house. Yeah, quite. We like an interesting control description, so that would be a cracker, wouldn't it? Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, we did that recce trip a couple of months ago. I knew Devon a bit from kind of back when, but Nick took me to some places that were wow. Wasn't really expecting this, have to say. I think it would be an easy trap to fall into, to think that the Southwest is kind of all gentle and benign and lovely and all the rest of it. I mean, it's all of those things, but it's pretty full on in places. There's definitely scope there for adventure, frankly. There's definitely scope there for this event. That's kind of one of the beauties of this 2-day format. We can go to places like the Southwest, and put races on in those and go to those amazing locations that wouldn't necessarily be able to sustain a 5-day race. So I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be really different. I don't think we've seen anything quite like this in the UK, possibly ever before, because as Nick says, it's tended to be focused kind of in the north of England and Scotland for many years now. I mean, there's been some Wales, Snowdonia ones as well. But I think this kind of race, I don't think has been really seen before. I think it's going to be tough, but because of the way that we designed that course, I think there's plenty of opportunity for this to be kind of the first race that folks do. That there will be options that will allow you to have a great weekend. Cool. Okay. Rosemary, do you want to go next? Bit of skills and equipment stuff. I mean, by definition here, we've not given you very much time. So this is overview stuff. We're not going to be able to delve too deeply into anything here. But again, chuck questions in chat, fire them to us afterwards, and we'll do what we can to answer stuff. Rosemary, over to you.
Thank you. So yeah, as Paul said, I'm doing skills and equipment, which are somewhat related to each other. So I'm going to kind of do them together as I go through. And I will just preface this that I don't know, I'm not involved in any of the course planning. I don't know any of the special stages. So don't think I'm kind of giving you any tips or hints by things I might say that you need skills about. It's kind of general overview of things you might need in a typical ITERA event. So there are some like obvious ones, as Paul's already kind of outlined in terms of the main kind of sports that you'll be doing, lots of off-road biking, typically also lots of trekking, not necessarily on paths all the time, some paddling. I say that varies. Here you can probably expect quite a lot of paddling. There's quite often a bit of rope work as well, so I'm going to kind of cover those 4 to start off with in that order. And then go on to a few other like extra bits that I think can be easy to forget, because you can focus a lot on I've got to learn how to bike and run, and that's not all there is to it. So starting off with biking, it does say in the rules you need a mountain bike. It's something obvious, no gravel bikes. But after that, it's just like up to you. And I would say, like, if you're new to this, my advice is ride what you have, ride what you're used to. You don't need to go running out and buying some fancy, lightweight, full suspension mountain bike. A hardtail, simple thing is plenty good enough. You will obviously need obvious things like helmets and inner tubes and know how to use them. But one of the things that can be a little bit harder, or you might not think of, is getting a map board, which is something that's on your handlebars, and you can put a map in there if you're map reading and navigating as you go. If you're a bit handy, you can probably create something makeshift yourself and strap a bit of board on there somehow. But you can also get nice ones that swivel and are lifted up. And there's some, if you just search on Google, you can find quite a nice review on an adventure racing page of different map boards that are available. And I'd also say, like, you do obviously need to be able to ride off-road, but it's not like, I'd say it's more important that you're used to being able to just keep pedaling for a long time than it is that you can ride some really gnarly trails and throw yourself down downhill tracks. That's not really what it's about. I have found in these events you might find yourself at some sort of, I don't know anything like what trail centres there might be in Devon, but red graded trails at trail centres is as hard as it generally gets, and you'll often have like miles and miles of like Land Rover tracks or roads, like minor roads, and you need to be able to just pedal for a long time and have the attitude of being willing to give things a go. And I'd say you might not think of it as a skill, but you're probably going to like end up getting off and pushing or carrying your bike at some point. We all do it. I race with a girl who's ridden to the South Pole, and we had to get off and push at times because things were just getting a bit much, and that's totally acceptable and fine. And I would say, like, if you want to get a bit more confidence, lots of places at trail centres will run skills sessions if you ask them. They might have things on, or you might be able to get a group of people together or your teammates together to go and get some tuition if you just want to get a bit more, touch up your mountain bike skills. But it should be able to do. You've got plenty of time to plan. So that's biking. The next one I've gone to is trekking, and I very deliberately called it trekking and not running. I think when I first started adventure racing, I was thinking, oh my gosh, it's running. I'm going to have to run 50k, 80k. It's impossible. So I'd say don't worry if you're a terrible runner, but do worry if you're not happy being on your feet for hours. But I would say the good news is this doesn't need much equipment to practice. You just need some decent off-road shoes and spend hours walking and get into rough terrain if you can. Practice like running, going over heathland or heather or bogs, that kind of stuff. Test, like, this might sound obvious, but just test things like your shoes and your socks and your backpack and your walking poles if you want to use them. And I would also say on trekking, like, practice, maybe even practice your navigation instead of using a GPS if that's what your default is. And I'll talk a bit more on that on skills. But yeah, it's trekking, time on feet. Paddling. So Nick did talk about this. I presume, Paul, is it going to be the sit on tops again?
It is, yes. So we're providing. I meant to mention this earlier on. So the organisation provides the boats, and they will be 2-person sit on tops. But that's all we provide. So if you paddles and buoyancy aid, and if you want seat backrests and things, you'd need to sort those out for yourselves.
Yeah.
But we provide the boats, and we move those boats around the course as well, obviously.
Yeah. And so I'd say is those sit on tops that Paul's talked about there, it's really hard to go wrong on them. They're designed for beginners. They're very heavy. They're very stable. But I would say your teammates will probably thank you if you can at least actually know how to generate forward propulsion on them. And I think a little practice can go a really long way on this. And depending where you live, maybe it can be a bit tricky to kind of find somewhere to do it. But I would say, embrace the process. If you need to kind of make a weekend away of it, go up to the lakes or wherever it is near you that run courses. I've done that in the past and had like full weekend of tuition doing kind of paddle skills, and it really helpful.
Yeah, Rosemary, do you mind if I just amplify that a little bit? Yes. We need you to come to the race with some paddling skills. In the same way that we need you to be able to ride a bike, we need you to come to the race with some paddling skills. You need to be able to you need to know things like how to fall off a boat and get back in it again. You need to know forward propulsion. You need to know steering. You need to know self-rescue, those kind of things. I would strongly, strongly, strongly recommend doing exactly what Rosemary's just suggested, which is going to get a bit of tuition and a bit of training and get some experience in the boats. Not only will that make you safer, but it will mean you're happier, more confident, safer, happy. You have a better time. And it also means that we can put something in front of you that's a bit more challenging. Not just we're not going to be paddling down canals, mainly because there kind of aren't any in Devon. Actually, there is one near where my mum lives, but we're not going there. As Nick said, the paddling in the southwest can be challenging. And we would like to challenge you. So I would strongly, strongly, strongly recommend some skills.
Yeah. And I'd say on the kit, Paul also mentioned you need things like your paddle and your buoyancy aid and maybe a kayak backrest. And I think these can be a bit of a big investment for a race. If you need to, I'd say I've been able to borrow those for quite a few races until I got my own. People in the adventure racing community or teammates. But you can also go to this place called Lomo, which is really good for really decent basic kit at prices that aren't going to totally break the bank. So, you can find these things if you need them. You don't need, again, your top of the range buoyancy aid. You can get a perfectly functional one that does the job for a lot less money than the top of the end ones. So, so that paddling, Paul talked a lot about that too. Rope work, I don't know if there's going to be any of this. You'll know in advance if there will be, because, for example, things like harness might be on the kit list. Probably nothing too technical, but you really should know how to put your harness on, and anything else that's advised, know how to use the kit. Again, this is something that I've also done in the past, gone and got some basic lessons at a local climbing wall. I had a one-to-one for a race where some really particular skills were needed and made sure I knew them in advance. Also, I think it can be helpful if you've got teammates who, depending on who you're racing with, maybe some of your teammates will have a bit more experience, and that can actually help with your confidence in checking what you're doing and reassuring. I would say, if you've had to learn how to paddle and how to climb for a race like this, you never know, you might find a new hobby as well. It's fun. It's not a chore to have to kind of learn these things. It's part of the process. So I kind of cantered through some of the four main potential sports there. So you might be thinking, well, what is it? That's it then, I've got the sports covered. But I'd say you're wrong if that's what you're thinking. So equipment, there are a few other things you need to take. You might have to carry them all the time. Some of the things you might need to buy. But what's really, I think is really, really good is that the Adventure Racing World Series have standardized the kit list. So if you kind of need to buy some kit for this event, it'll be the same kit, apart from anything special for each event. But it'll be the same basic kit you need for any other race in the series or any future races you're doing. And I also think it's a pretty sensible list. Like most of the stuff that's on there, I take when I go out on a big ride on my own anyway, or an adventure on foot, like bivy bags and good layers and a decent head torch and compasses, all this really sensible stuff for looking after yourself.
As we stand, just to thanks, Rosemary. You kind of covered something that I thought I've missed that from my list of things. Brilliant, thank you for that. Just that AR World Series kit list is great because it does standardise, and as you say, it does all those things as well. We are not currently planning for there to be any kind of special kit over and above that. I think that's correct, isn't it, Nick? I don't think I'm not aware that we're going to ask for anything over and above the World Series kit list. So aim at that and you'll be fine. If that changes, you will get a clear communication from me via your team captains as early as we possibly can. But right now, I don't think there's anything special.
Just there's a few things I thought, have a look at that list in advance. There's a few things that might catch you out, like digital waterproof camera. We all use our phones these days, but not our phones in the events. You need to be able to take photos if required. There's things like a knife, a strobe. There's a couple of little unusual things that you wouldn't normally maybe take with you, but not too many of them. And so they're also that's equipment I was going to pretty much covered, but skills, I think there's a whole ton of skills, and some of these are actually more important than your physical mountain biking or trekking or paddling skills, or some of the kind of technical things. You need those things, but these things are as or more important, some of them. So map reading is the obvious one for navigation. Paul already mentioned that in his introduction. Make sure at least one of your team can do it competently. Again, get some training in. If you can't do it, don't be afraid, go out and practice. There's companies like Nav4 who I know are big supporters of ITERA, who run all sorts of events in that, and there's other providers up and down the country. You might want to kind of go out and get some specific orienteering type practice and be familiar with those maps. I've seen them crop up in the race. Again, it's not essential, but it can help you get familiar. You go to some of those events and find yourself being beaten by a 75-year-old who knows how to read a map at speed on an orienteering course. It's happened to me. But yeah, all good fun. My next one is like logistics. Again, I think you need at least one of your teammates who's like really good at logistics. You'll get like information quite late in terms of, you'll get a schematic and maybe a week or two before the race, and you've got to kind of work out what you need to pack and where, what bags things might need to go into. And then like very shortly before the race, you get your maps and your briefing. So you need someone who can make sense of that schematic, the rule book. You get a course book that's got lots of information about cutoffs, and or you need to take some shoes on that mountain biking leg. So you just need to make sure you've got all that sorted and you're really clear about what you need where, and being organized. So that's a key skill. Transitions. My partner actually volunteered on a 2014 ITERA, and he said the difference between the front and back teams coming through transition was just incredible in terms of the speed and the organization. I know it's something I've had to work at. There's a few tips thinking ahead about, when you're coming in, thinking ahead about what you want to do, what your different roles are, being organized with your kit and not just all skittering to the winds when you go into transition, but staying coordinated and working as a team. Which leads on to my next one as well, which is about efficiency. So I think there's something about sorting your kit, about, it's when you're in transitions, but it's also when you're on the course, and when you're getting your kit ready beforehand. So you need to know where it is. You want to pack neatly, practice carrying it even when you're training, so you don't look down. I've done it. I've gone out of my door in the middle of Edinburgh and trekked with a full, kit pack. So I know getting used to where things are. I think being efficient as a team, you want to kind of talk to each other. You all end up going to the toilet together at the same time, or snacking at the same time, or sleeping at the same time. It sounds like funny, but you do need to be efficient, and which leads on to teamwork, which is another like really critical skill. Paul said it already. Super critical if you want to have a nice time. I'd say pick your teammates carefully. And one of the things I would really highlight is like a lack of ego. You'll go faster as a team if you're willing to ask for help or accept help when it's offered. I think one of the funniest things I saw, I think it might have been Adam Rose, who was one of the people who helped organise a couple of years ago, which was, remember, if your teammates ask if you'd like a tow or some help, they're not actually really being nice and polite. What they're saying is, you need to be on the tow now, or you need us to carry some of your kit now. Paul, you might laugh. It's happened to you, right?
I confirm this is true. Rosemary dragged me through the Faroe Islands for at least 2 days.
So teamwork is critical, and knowing what your roles are and what you're doing. Next one, sense of adventure. I would say you never know what might happen. You could find yourself, these are things that I've found myself doing. I don't know if they'll come up in this event, but there will be some special stages, and you don't know what they are until you get the course book, basically. So you might be jumping off a cliff. I've jumped off to cliffs into like rivers and done gorge scrambling. I've done coast steering, where you're kind of going around the coast and jumping on and off, and a bit of scrambling. Crawling through caves I did that in Wales. You might be abseiling off cliffs or viaducts or castles. I've done all of those in ITERA events. So it could be pretty much anything. And like I say, it sounds pretty exciting, doesn't it? It's one of the things you kind of look forward to in these events, a bit unknown, but you need to have that sense of adventure and go, isn't it fantastic we're doing these things, rather than, that's part of the spirit of entering the event. Got 2 to go. One is like, the next one is like your ability to suffer a little bit and stay cheerful and optimistic. You're going to get sore feet or sore shoulders. You're going to be too hot, too cold, or too hungry, or you're going to feel nausea. Something's going to can't find your way out of this stupid quarry. There's like loads of things that can happen. And, you've got to find your own motivation to why you're doing an event. For me, it's all about a goal of finishing and not letting my teammates down, but people have different motivations. And I think it's just keep helping yourself, helping your team, helping each other, problem solving, moving forward. Something that's great about this event, it's not a half marathon where you're all out, and if it goes wrong, that's it. It's days, hours, up to 55 hours or 56 hours. So something feels bad, I like wait it out a bit, give it a few hours, and it's almost certainly going to start feeling better within reason. So I've had a teammate who was really nauseous, sick, 18 hours later she was flying. So sometimes you've got to work through these things and not just give up at the first hurdle. And my last one is, might come in handy if you've got skills like singing ability, storytelling, cracking jokes. All these might come in handy in those times that I've just mentioned. So my closing words is like, don't let the kit and skills put you off. I think it's all achievable. A little bit of knowledge and the right mindset and the right team can get you a really long way. There's plenty of time to prepare and like brush up on those skills if you've not already got them. And you know, get some tuition or training in them if you need to. And I think once you've got started, you'll probably want to do it again, and those skills will come in handy. And I think just my main tip is like, enjoy learning those new things and the process of getting ready. It's like half the fun of the race. So
brilliant. Thanks, Rosemary. Spot on. I think that was great. That's loads of just kind of packed into that, loads of really useful stuff. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think it's time to kind of turn the floor now to a couple of folks who did ITERA 2025, the big one, as their first ever adventure race. Foolhardy, brave, or stupid, you choose. Kerry and Calum may be familiar faces to many of you. So they were part of the BBC Scotland team that raced ITERA 2025. They were kind of thrown together, I think, to a degree, in order to kind of have a team that the BBC could then follow. So I suspect that, you know, even a few months out, none of that team knew they were going to be doing this race. So they are possibly the most newbies we've ever had. But they finished. And they're here to chat today. So it can't have been that bad, or perhaps it was, and we'll find out in a moment. So hello, Calum. Hello, Kerry. And we're going to do this as a little bit of a Q&A style thing. And I guess the first question is just tell us, you know, what was your experience? What happened to you? You know, what happened? How was ITERA 2025 for you? Calum, you can go first on that one.
Yeah, ITERA, so my first ever adventure race, the first ever really properly multi-day thing that I'd ever done, other than self-organized things. So it was great overall, but also very stressful overall. I found it quite stressful. And I think actually in hindsight, a lot of the stress came from the approach I had to the race beforehand. And an issue that I imagine most teams won't face, the fact that we were filming it and having to speak to camera and then having to think about doing that and having to try and plan that as well. That just really kind of wore me down a bit. I think I definitely lost any cheerfulness at some points during the race. But there were definitely highlights too. And I've got loads of bits I look back on with good memories. Loads of bits I look back on and being like, I just wish we'd done something slightly different at that junction or at that, at that decision point. So for me, it was really good overall because I enjoy these kind of things. But it was at the same time, I have to admit, somewhat stressful.
We could see that in your eyes at times, if I'm honest. Kerry, how did you find it?
Oh, it was brilliant. I have to say, Calum was the team leader and he was also doing the map reading and he was also doing most of the media stuff. So it's absolutely no surprise that quite a lot of that was stressful. And I think my takeaway from that was just how hard map reading is and navigation is when you're tired and when you're having to deal with everything else. And it really wasn't fair that you were the team captain as well as the navigator too. And it was like, I loved it because I just love doing adventure things. I love the crack and I love being part of it. I found the team dynamic thing really tough because we were thrown together and some of us didn't really maybe do our due diligence, you could say, or were clear on what was actually going to happen. So what happens in that instance is that other people start to have to carry the load for people that aren't really doing a lot of the work. So doing pre-planning and what I call a pre-mortem as well is really important. Like figuring out how as a team you're going to deal with things when it falls apart, when someone gets really tired, when navigation starts going wrong, when batteries start going flat on lights and all this kind of stuff. And really those are bonding opportunities as well as really tough challenges. Yes, I would say defining those roles and making sure that a massive mental load isn't placed on one person. I would say it did on Calum is really important. And we had a week of that, and across a week, you're degrading day after day after day, and that will happen at the shorter event as well, I would imagine. So going through those eventualities is really important, but things will pop up that you wouldn't have imagined and think on the spot as well, and that's really cool. And when it gets really hard, you have to remember that doing this stuff is what you dream about when you're at your desk at work. And go back to your desk at work and remember that you're lucky to be there and you have to just sit in your shit and crack on, and before you know it, you're through it, and it's the best thing ever.
Brilliant, nice one, Kerry. I think you kind of hit on a really important point there about that kind of the load, but sharing the load bearing, and navigation is kind of one area where that's really important. Nick might kind of comment on this as kind of as a member of a kind of a leading team, but I've raced with a handful of folks in this room, and we've generally there's you try and have more than one navigator in the team, if nothing else. And that's partially a reflection of just how hard it is. That it's mentally taxing, to be on all the time is really hard. So try and get to the point where you've got at least two competent navigators in your team. So absolutely you can share the load and back each other up as well. It's like, I think this is right. Or it's not even, actually, it doesn't even need to be as obvious as that. Rosemary will kind of maybe, will have, maybe comment, I don't know. But it's that kind of like, are you sure about that? Is that, and it's about having in that situation, it's about having the ego about not having the ego to go, of course I know what I'm doing. It's all about getting the team to the finish line as quickly as you can. And that means sharing the load. I think it's a really important point. Yeah. So thanks, Kerry. You guys came into it with, you've both clearly got backgrounds in stuff. For those that aren't aware, Kerry won Strathpuffer at the weekend. So you've both done stuff, but this was clearly a different kind of level of stuff. What are the things that you wish you'd known before you started? What do you wish someone had told you in this session last year, Kerry?
I wish I'd known that there was going to be hot water at every single transition. I didn't know that, so that there was a big mental load around how to prepare food and all the eventualities going into that, actually. And had I known that, I would have just been like, oh, I'll just buy, like the meals that what do you call them? The dehydrated meals, just to make life, just to remove a mental load when I get to transition, because all I'm doing is sticking it under hot water and off I go. I wish I knew that, and I do wish that I'd had the wherewithal to really think about team roles more thoroughly, because I just assumed that every single one in the team was as strong, and not strong physically. Like committed to understanding the schematics and how transitions worked, and I hadn't anticipated that maybe one person wasn't really interested in that, and everyone else was having to kind of do a lot of that mental load, and it really grinds you down. And like that was a bit like, that was really tough for me. And it's a team thing. Like, you have to park your ego, because you're only as strong as the weakest person in the team, and you really do have to sort of work together. And one really important thing for me as well was, when you're in an adventure race, you're in a bubble. So if you're the type of person that thinks, I need 7 hours of sleep a night to function, no, you don't, because you're not going to work, you're not looking after your children, you're not cooking your dinner, you're not in real life, you're in an adventure race, and you need to lean into that. And you need to start like pushing your boundaries a little bit and exploring what that is, because it's an absolutely incredible opportunity to do that. So lean into that discomfort and figure out what you can do when you think you can't.
Good advice. Calum, what springs to mind of stuff to you, of stuff that you wish you'd known kind of this time last year, really?
On a very, very practical basis, practicing navigating on a bike. So whilst you're cycling, because you're moving a lot quicker than you are when you're walking, when you're running. And even very simple stuff like you're in a town, you think it's going to be obvious. Stuff like that becomes tricky, especially when you're lacking sleep. A junction in a forest becomes tricky. Is it the next junction? Because you can see two junctions. So practice that. And I think Rosemary mentioned it, having the specialist bike map board. I didn't have one, and in hindsight, it would have been a big bonus. Just that I had my map strapped to my handlebars with like bungees, and it just getting it up, getting it off, putting it back on, getting it off, just wasted a bit of time and fat. So yeah, on a very simple basis, practice navigating on a bike with a map. You don't have to make it super complicated, but just having the kind of ability to do it before being in the race is one thing. One thing we picked up literally on the bus to the start of the race, our sleep plan had been, actually, we're going to get a bit of sleep every single night. And, Kerry's mentioning about the team, some people want sleep more than others. So our plan had been to sleep every night And then on the bus to the start, we overheard a team talking about no one sleeps on the first night. So we were like, okay, right, let's change our plan, like 3 hours before the start of the race. So that, again, wasn't ideal. There's a really good YouTube channel, AR on AR, with loads of like tips. So if you don't know anyone who's done adventure racing, that's really good for giving you info from someone who's done quite a lot. But yeah, I'd speak to someone who's done an adventure race to get these kind of super simple, obvious things. And you can have a sleep plan. Everyone's got a different one, but ideally don't change it so close to the start of the race.
I didn't realise you'd done that. Brilliant.
Nah.
I'm just going to go back to a point that Kerry made, and it was about kind of parking your ego, and you're only as fast as your slowest team member, and that's absolutely true. One of the things that's kind of weird about adventure racing is these things are so long that who's the strongest and who's the weakest changes through time. You know, just because you're a strong cyclist now doesn't mean you're going to be a strong cyclist tomorrow. And that kind of ebbs and flows. It's almost like a kind of a sine wave curve. And you kind of hope that you kind of never get into a situation where, you know, all of you are hitting your low point at the same point. You know, none of you, you know, you're all at the bottom point of the curve. But it's really interesting that, you know, it kind of comes back to the thing that Rosemary, I think, was talking about. You know, you keep going. You might feel like shit now, but you've got a team around you that are dragging you because they're now strong. And, you know, in 12 hours time, the tables could well and probably will turn. It's a really interesting phenomenon how that, you know, who's strong and who's weak ebbs and flows, and you've got to be ready to roll with it, and you've got to, as Kerry said, got to park your ego. Courses don't tolerate ego really. I haven't teed this question up, but I suspect it will be hopefully it'll be an easy one for you both to ask. Don't be scared about it. It's in the sense of adventure. What were your high points? What were your low points? What was the kind of the moment that sticks in your memory for both of those reasons? With you know, within the grounds of diplomacy. Kerry, do you want to go first?
The high point. I in the Falls of Foyer. So it blows my mind how much we did in that week. Before we started, I was like, oh my God, it costs a fortune to do adventure racing. And then at the end of the week, I was like, what a flipping bargain between all of the things that you're doing. And I'm petrified of heights, and I couldn't believe that we had to jump in like at midnight, do that cliff jump in the Falls of Foyer into that cold water at midnight. And I was so tired that I was relieved because I just couldn't really feel anything. I was like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. But I was bloody petrified. But it was also such a thrill and such an adrenaline rush, which is what I lived for. I loved that, even though I was absolutely petrified. And that was a pure high point.
I'll let you all into a secret because Nick's in this room as well, and I have told him this. So for those that didn't see it, it was kind of like a zip wire that came off a viewing platform down into the splash pool of a waterfall. But at one point, we kind of stopped your travel down the rope, and you then had to drop off the end of another rope and into the splash pool. For most people, it was, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 meters, something like that.
No, it was 500 meters. It was so high.
It felt like that.
It felt like that.
It felt like that for Nick because it probably was. We actually stopped Nick's travel short so that he deliberately had a longer fall into the splash pool because it was Nick, really. I'm not sure he's ever forgiven me for that. Brilliant. That was pretty special. That moment, watching that happen was pretty special. I mean, it was a bit of an audacious stage. It made me very nervous. We got away with it. I think people enjoyed it by and large and had fun. And I think even if you didn't have fun, I think people kind of stand back and go, "Well, that was special. That was different."
Yeah, I was petrified, but it felt special, and it was midnight, and we were so tired, and you'd been through so much emotionally through that day already, and yeah.
Shall I go to Calum next for his high point while you think about a low point? Should we do that? Yeah, Calum, high point.
High point for me came very soon after a low point, and we'd been struggling to find one of the checkpoints, and it was almost the relief. Partly because I was navigating or finding the checkpoint, but I think it gave the whole team a lift as well. And the fact that in trying to find the checkpoint, the whole team I had been the one who'd been like, let's maybe drop it. And the rest of the team like, no, we can find it. We can definitely find it. So then us all to find it, within 20 minutes of that was a real high point because it was starting to get a wee bit negative and it lifted us. So for me, that was a high point. Yeah, it was like a dark bit of hillside. Couldn't see anything. It wasn't like a visual highlight or anything. No adrenaline, but So good.
Actually, I've got.
So isn't finding every checkpoint a high point? I'm like, yes, another one, celebrate everyone.
Probably kind of my high point of all time. Rosemary, you were there. It was Wales in 2014, and we were deep into the race, day 3, day 4, something like that, and we were climbing up the Brecon Beacons, and dawn rose as we kind of reached the edge of the Corrie Rim. And, a fresh day and this beautiful dawn sun rising and up on these mountains and this, with this group of people. And the hairs are rising on the back of my neck right now. There was just a moment where I thought, I don't want to be anywhere else. This is just perfect. And it was an amazing moment. Those things do happen. They do happen. But it's crap as well sometimes. Rosemary, I remember your blisters in 2012. I can't imagine that was a lot of fun. So, Calum, any low points that are worth perhaps drawing attention to?
Yeah,
sorry, Kerry. Kerry, you go first. Kerry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was a victim of bad blisters, and it was just new shoes that hadn't broken in, and it was horrendous. It was just crap, really, really sore, just really poor attention to feet hygiene, and I paid for it, and it made it impossible for me to do the Ben Venus leg, and impacted the team as well. It was just yeah, and that coupled with, like, there was two things. It was that, and then what felt like the slowest transitions in the world. And I am like a woman of efficiency, and having to like wait for other people was also a point where you just had to park yourself, like just get over yourself, like you're with the team here, like there's nothing you can do. You're beholden to your team right now. Just let them faff. And that was hard. That was really hard. And I think everyone in a team has those moments where you just feel that frustration with your teammates, but you also have to recognize that you cause frustration to other people as well. And it's that, like, when you're low, other people are high and vice versa. So
brilliant. Bon. Calum, low points.
Low points. There was a point where second night, but no one had slept properly. Or was it third night? I can't remember this point. But we got lost on like what was quite a straightforward hill, and quite a, in hindsight, in daylight, quite a straightforward piece of navigation. But I think it was the tiredness and some slight confusion as to like cut-offs and stuff. For me, that was quite a low point. The low point was actually just like struggling to find this checkpoint that on a hill that I feel like I should have known. Yeah, and then also Kenny's feet were a bit slow. Yeah.
Low point, not finding the check.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Brilliant. Right, I think probably kind of last question, then we'll wrap up and we'll move on to some of the questions that appeared in the chat there, if that's all right. I mean, I suppose it's a kind of a two-parter. I think we've covered quite a lot of this already, but any other bits of advice you'd pass on to newcomers? And fundamentally, did you enjoy it? Calum, you go.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. I think so. Approaching it, I think in the early stages, I was getting a bit annoyed by like, this bike having to put away in a box and then take it back out and build it. But actually, that added to it, I think. And yeah, overall, I definitely enjoyed it. It was something unlike something I'd ever done, traveling in a group before like that. Seeing the other teams, the other teams occasionally help you out. You can help other teams out. I really enjoyed that aspect too, and meeting the other teams. So it was a lot of fun overall. I think one piece of advice I could give to someone, if you're doing a kayak leg afterwards, have a change of clothes. If you plan to run in that, I start to get chafing on the first run after a kayak leg, because I thought, it'll be fine, the weather's not too bad. You're going to get wet in a kayak at sea, so plan to have a change of clothes after that. But yeah, I'd say don't let yourself get too negative, even though it can be maybe easy to do that. If you're tired, you've missed something, just force yourself to have a smile sometimes, and that can really help yourself, but help your team as well.
Nice one, brilliant. Kerry, same question for you. Any kind of other bits of advice, and did you enjoy it?
Yeah. It's so brilliant. There was so much diversity to what we were doing, the landscapes that we were passing through by bike, by hike, by foot, by rope, by kayak. It was wild. Even in Loch Torridon on the first day, I was like, flipping next, this is really choppy, and somebody capsized next to us, and you're like, oh my God. It just feels so wild, and it's such a cool thing to do. Like, I can't believe that this is I remember watching it on Transworld Sport as a kid, actually, and then being in an adventure race thinking, holy smokes, this is incredible. So I think anyone who signs up is going to have the most amazing time. That on a practical level, check the dates on your kit, because when we were putting our helmets and harnesses through, some of the helmets were like they were out of date. So make sure that all of your kit is within date actually. So it was good that they checked those. There's practicalities around bike boxes, but again, as Calum said, all of that information is available online. Make sure that you and your teammates know what you're doing. Make sure that you're breaking your trainers and you've got a good pair of socks. A few probably spares pairs of socks as well. And it's just brilliant. It's a great opportunity. And as Calum said, like, don't forget how lucky you are to be doing it, and to like it's going to be shit at times, but that's life. Like, you sit in it and then you pass through it, and it's the best thing ever. So yeah.
Brilliant. Calum and Kerry, thank you very much. That's been really, really good. I think that's been brilliant. I've enjoyed that, and hopefully you have, and hopefully everybody else has as well. So thanks again. So what we'll do next is there's a handful of questions that have appeared in the chat. So we'll try and address those, and then we'll wrap up, and that'll be us. So if you've got a question, shove it in the chat now. I'll start at the top and I'll work my way down. We'll see how we go. We might draw a line at this at some point, but we'll crack on. So Adventure Ross, what about being prepared to be in the water rather than on the water for this race? Wetsuits, goggles, toe floats. It's a good question. We don't normally, but it is not out with the realms of possibility that we could include a swim stage. It's a possibility. It's certainly one of the adventure racing disciplines. So, we will tell you about that ahead of time if that's the case. But actually, just for general kayaking use, things like wetsuits, particularly for longer kayak legs, are not a bad idea. I probably wouldn't necessarily, others will disagree and have their own views on this. I wouldn't necessarily go down full-blown dry suit because they're expensive and fragile. But thinking about wetsuits, for example, would not be a crazy idea. Even if you don't plan to go in the water, you don't plan to capsize. Actually, when the wind blows, being on top of a sit-on kayak is a chilly place to be, and a wetsuit and a whole pile of clothing is probably a good move. So you may need to think about that. So wetsuits are not an insane piece of kit to bring along. And as Rosemary said, you can get hold of really cheap ones. We're talking kind of cheap water sports wetsuits here. Nothing fancy for swimming or anything like that. In some ways, the more robust, the better. And there's loads of those things kicking around. As Sophie said, you can rent this kind of stuff. Beg, borrow, steal. You don't have to, you shouldn't need to go and spend a huge pile of cash here. It can generally be done from stuff that you already, that you largely, hopefully, already own. If you've got the skills, you're already doing some of this stuff, and you've probably got some of the kit. The next, so other speakers, feel free to chip in if I've not kind of covered everything here. Chris then asks, Paul, can you mention age of kit? And Kerry, you picked up on this a second ago as well. We've realised more, maybe that doesn't reflect well on ours, but that kit, particularly safety kit, has a shelf life. It has an expiry date, but it isn't a precise science. So we've had issues in the past with buoyancy aids. They degrade over time. The foam degrades over time. So there is a lifespan for those things. Ditto things like climbing harnesses and climbing helmets, which are, frankly, they're PPE. They're essential pieces of safety kit. In the same way that kind of, if you're doing rope access work or working on a building site, even, your safety kit has to be inspected and has a shelf life. So does this kit. What that number is a slightly imprecise science. We did a bit of work on this. Actually, Paul Taylor, who's in the meeting, Paul's son Richard, produced me a really interesting document during the summer. And I think it was to do with climbing helmets. And each manufacturer basically puts a different time span on it. Clearly, they want to sell helmets, and that's what that's about. We created a problem, frankly. If I'm honest, we created a problem at the race this in 2025 by requiring climbing helmets to be within a specific date. And the mistake we made was not telling people that in advance. And so there was a little bit of chaos, it's fair to say, at registration. We will not be making that mistake again. So we'll produce some guidance on that. But yeah, your kit, those essential pieces of safety kit, harnesses, helmets, buoyancy aids are the particular ones we'll be looking at. Slings as well, if we require you to have slings. They do have an expiration date. So we'll try and help with some guidance on that. You should find that there are tags and labels and stuff like that on any kit that you have at the moment. My harness certainly does. My climbing helmet certainly does. And
Unless it's so old it predated that legislation, which mine
does. Which is a
like anyone.
Which is a possibility as well. So I mean, some of the buoyancy aids we had show up in whenever that was, 2019, I think it was. Kind of, I suspect they were last used by Noah. And they sank in the canal, almost under their own weight. There was no buoyancy at all. So be aware of that, but we will try and produce a bit of guidance on that to try and avoid the situation that we had this year, which I know wasn't helpful. Sasha, AR on AR is fantastic. I'm not sure if Adam Rose, who is AR, is in the meeting tonight. He might be. But yeah, AR and AR is a brilliant resource to go and have a look at. It's a bunch of videos and things, tutorials and discussion things that Adam Rose has done that's on YouTube, I believe. So AR on AR. Go and have a look at that. Adam is great at that stuff. It's really, really good. Another really good resource just to mention, and I think somebody did mention this earlier on, I think it might have been Rosemary. Nav4 run some really great training courses. They put loads of teams in. So if you're curious but don't have a team, track down the guys at Nav4. Paul, you might like to perhaps put a contact web address or email address or something in the chat so people have that. Contact Nav4. They can help in terms of skills. They run some training weekends. They can hook you up with other people to create teams. They're a massive supporter of adventure racing in the UK and around the world, and a really good resource in terms of picking up those skills and stuff like that. Bike boxes we've spoken about a little bit. Yeah, Calum, practice cycling as a pair and a group discipline and drafting. I think there was something in, was it in your film or the Welsh team film? There was a section on, I think it was the Welsh team film, learning how to ride in a group and not disappearing off the front and not crashing into each other, basically. Yes, Rosemary, I saw that. Guilty.
I was thinking about issues in tunnels in the Faroes.
Tunnels in the Faroes, yeah. Practice cycling at night and navigating at night. Yeah, Sasha, spot on. I mean, that's, we don't all go out in the dark because it's dark and it's horrible out there, but you will be racing through the night. You need to be comfortable in that environment. Not only riding the bike, but navigating. And navigating in the dark on a bike is particularly tricky because you've got to have light to read a map, light to see where you're going, and those are not necessarily the same thing. So yeah, night navigation on a bike is particularly tricky and worth at least trying before you come to the race. Chris, bags and boxes. I presume that's a reference to kind of the event logistics. Rather than me give chapter and verse and get this wrong. This is Big Chris. That's why bags and boxes. That's Big Chris, who's our logistics manager. So we move your equipment around the course. The organisation, we move your equipment. So your bikes in their boxes, your kit bags, your kayak stuff. We move everything around the course. There is a limit to what we allow you to bring there. That's all detailed on the website. There's a tab, I think it's on the updates tab, and then there's a thing called bag and boxes. And it details what each team can have. You can have a bunch of bags, you can have your bike boxes. It's all in there. The weight limits are in there. The size limits are in there. It's all there. One thing to note on bike boxes, which is a really hard rule that we have, no bungees. No bungees on bike boxes because they have a habit of twanging off and injuring our marshals, our crew. Clearly, we don't want that. So go and have a look at the bags and boxes section of the website, and everything is detailed there. when we
Can I just say, Paul, on the boxes, like I raced with someone who was totally new to adventure racing last year. And I said, that's the box you need. It's got quite strict dimensions. And he's like, oh, but I've just found this one and it's a couple of centimeters bigger. Is that all right? And I'm like, no, it's not all right. Oh, but this is a bit smaller in that way. Well, you won't fit your bike. And I'm like, it's still not all right because it's all got to stack up nicely in the van and, fit into the space. So I just say, like, it's tempting to think that's a guideline, but it's a really kind of strict standard size again for the World Series, and you can buy them. They're a bit expensive, but you can also make them, and there's like, again, templates and videos online about how to do that, or you can maybe get someone to do it for you.
Brilliant. Yeah, and that's not us being dicks. It's about us being able to. We've got, I mean, literally hundreds, if not thousands, of bag movements and box movements during the course of a race, and they all need to operate really smoothly. Chris prides himself on we have never yet had a bag or a box not end up in the right place at the right time. But it's a work of art to make that happen. And those dimensions of boxes are critical for that reason, because it matters on how we stack vans. And it's not us being difficult. It's like, that's what we need it to be in order for the logistics to work. But all of that is detailed on the website. Go and have a look. Go and have a look on that for chapter and verse. Feels a bit complicated. It makes sense in practice. One of the things that we will do when we issue the schematic, which happens about 10 days before the race. So what the schematic is essentially, these are the stages. These are what type the stage is. This is the order they come in. This is roughly how long they're going to take and how long they physically are. But we also detail the transition areas between those stages. And we tell you on that schematic which bags, which boxes will be at that transition area. So that takes a bit of getting your head round. Somebody definitely mentioned that earlier on about having somebody in your team that's good with that logistics stuff and just thinking through those processes. We don't set out to trap you, but it does require thought, and we don't really hold your hand. This is adventure racing. We require you to kind of to be able to kind of make decisions and spot stuff for yourself. We don't deliberately catch you out. But yeah, that schematic will illustrate to you what bags and boxes go to which transition areas, because it isn't all to everywhere. It just isn't possible to do that. Scrolling on down the line, there's a link someone's posted. Thanks, Paul, to AR on AR. Matthew, will the pairs course and the quads be the same at this ITERA? Yes, they will. It will be the same course for both quads and pairs this year. And what we're seeing here, there's a link on there from Paul to the Nav4 stuff. So that's all sat there in chat. Make a note of that if you want that. I think we've kind of dealt with all of those questions and comments that have appeared in there. So thank you very much for those. So I kind of think that we're pretty close to wrapping up here. I just wanted to say a couple of things. One of them is that entries are still open. We've got an early bird price rise at the end of the month. So do get in. We do have a finite number of spaces in the race, which is determined by things like the size of slats and lay, etc. So do get your entry in ASAP if you think you're interested in racing. Price goes up at the end of the month. I was going to mention other resources, but that's kind of happening over there on the chat right now, which is brilliant. So that's fantastic. So I kind of think we're pretty much done here. I just wanted to say a massive thank you to Kerry, Calum, Nick, and Rosemary for all your hard work on this. Also to my colleague Jamie, who I think is sat in the meeting here somewhere, who's done great work on helping pull this all together. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. I hope that's been informative, and I hope that's been useful. I hope that's kind of helped tip you over the edge and come and have a go at adventure racing. It's the most amazing sport with incredible experiences. You will go to incredible places, and as Kerry said, you'll stand at the end of the week and go, did we really do all that? Did all of that happen? And the answer is yeah, it did. And you will have done it entirely self-powered. So it's a fantastic thing to get involved in. I think it's going to be pretty spectacular. Nick is coming up with a great course. It's in an amazing location. I think it's going to be a lot of fun and a bit of luck. It's the southwest of England. The weather might not be too shit. Who knows? Who knows? So,
too hot, Paul. We're going to get like heat
right.
exhaustion.
We're going to get heat exhaustion. I'm going to call it a day there. I'm just going to deal with one question that's just come up on the chat, which is, can you follow up later with a bit more description about what's at base camp? Do we need tents, etc., or all in dorms? Everyone is in dorms. Everyone has a bed. Pay your entry fee. Your accommodation's taken care of. We look after some food. Basically, the meals, the way you're going to be at the race HQ. It's detailed on the website. But you're all going to be in dorms. We provide food while you're in Slapton. We're trying to make it easy, basically. We're trying to do this as a bit of a package thing. Pay your entry fee, and it's kind of taken care of. Okay, so I think on that note, we'll call it a day there. Thank you very much for everybody for attending. Thanks.
Paul, can I just add? Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
I'm willing to give up some. If any teams want some help with anything, newbie teams preparing for the race, then just contact me, and I'm happy to give up some time just to give them some advice and stuff for free. Not looking for any money or anything like that. So yeah, I can give you some guidance over the years of stuff I've done, and I remember my first race like it was yesterday. So I know exactly what we've all been there. So, but I'm happy to give up time to help some teams. And like Paul said, we're not going to hold your hand through the race, but we can get you as prepared as we can beforehand. And I think, Paul, normally before the race starts, we do have an extra newbie session as well, don't we?
Yeah, we started doing that a couple of races ago, and I think it works really well. So we'll kind of around the same time, just after, I think it is, just after the briefing, which is when we usually do the course reveal. We'll do a newbies briefing as well, and it'll be kind of in a room somewhere. It's usually kind of course planner and me, maybe the race referee, those kind of folks. And it's basically, it's a targeted briefing at newbies. You'll have the maps by then, you'll have the course by then, the route book, and it's an opportunity to ask the questions that you perhaps don't want to ask kind of anywhere else. And the intention there is there are no stupid questions. Our stated aim is to get people to the finish line. And if we can kind of help you do that with, by providing information, then we're absolutely on board with that. So thank you, Nick. That's very generous. Drop us a note on email and we can kind of connect people together if you don't have Nick's contact details. Brilliant. Okay, right. Let's call it a day there. Thank you, everybody. We almost ran to time. That's not bad going, is it? Brilliant. Thanks again to all the presenters. Hope to see you all in Slapton in the summer. Thanks, everybody.